My hands trembled as I walked into the conference room that Tuesday morning. 5 years of late nights, skipped lunches, and weekend projects had led to this moment. Marcus Bennett, my department head, sat at the head of the table with that signature smirk I'd learned to dread. I'd worked harder than anyone in the marketing department at Silverstone Corporation, bringing in clients worth millions. Everyone knew I deserved this promotion. I'd earned it through blood, sweat, and countless sacrifices. My colleagues had congratulated me all week, certain that today would change everything. As I took my seat, I noticed the other department heads weren't present. Just Marcus and me. Something felt wrong, but I pushed the feeling aside. This was my moment. I'd prepared a small acceptance speech, practiced my gracious smile in the mirror that morning. Little did I know that the next 10 minutes would shatter everything I'd built and expose a truth I'd been desperately trying to ignore. "Victoria," Marcus began, leaning back in his leather chair. "You've been with us for 5 years now." I nodded eagerly, my heart racing with anticipation. "Yes, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity. I'm excited about my raise and the new responsibilities." That's when it happened. Marcus chuckled. Not a friendly laugh, but something cold and calculating that made my skin crawl. "What raise?" he said, his eyes narrowing. "You're dreaming if you think you're getting promoted." The words hit me like a physical blow. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" My voice came out smaller than I intended. Marcus stood up, walking around the table toward me. "Victoria, you're a smart woman. Surely you understand how things work around here." I felt my stomach twist into knots. This couldn't be happening. Not after everything I'd done, everything I'd sacrificed for this company. "I don't understand," I managed to say, though deep down, a horrible realization was beginning to dawn. Marcus perched on the edge of the table, too close for comfort. "The promotion was supposed to go to someone who understands the full scope of corporate relationships," he said smoothly. "Someone willing to be a team player in every sense." His meaning was crystal clear, and bile rose in my throat. For months, Marcus had been making comments, sending late-night messages, finding excuses to brush against me in the hallway. I'd ignored it all, convinced that my work would speak for itself. How naive I'd been. "My performance reviews have been excellent," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I brought in the Henderson account, the Morrison deal, and increased our social media engagement by 300%. Marcus waved his hand dismissively. "Numbers are just numbers, Victoria. What matters is loyalty. Personal loyalty." The room felt like it was closing in on me. "I've been loyal to this company," I protested. "I've given everything to my work." Marcus's smile turned predatory. "But you haven't given everything to me, have you?" There was. The truth laid bare in the fluorescent lighting of the conference room. 6 months ago, Marcus had invited me to dinner to discuss my career trajectory. I'd gone thinking it was professional. By dessert, his hand was on my knee. I'd pulled away, made an excuse, and left. 2 months later, at the company retreat, he'd knocked on my hotel room door at midnight with a bottle of wine. I'd pretended to be asleep. Every advance I'd rejected, every inappropriate comment I'd deflected with nervous laughter, every time I'd chosen dignity over degradation, it had all been tallied against me. "I see," I said quietly, standing up on shaky legs. "So this promotion was never about my work." Marcus shrugged, completely unbothered by my distress. "In the corporate world, it's about relationships, Victoria. You're a beautiful, intelligent woman. You could have everything you want. Corner office, executive parking, 6-figure salary. All you have to do is stop being so difficult." The word hung in the air between us like poison. Difficult. Because I wouldn't sleep with my married boss. Because I believed my work should matter more than my willingness to compromise my values. "And if I refuse?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Marcus's expression hardened. "Then you'll stay exactly where you are. In fact, I'm reassigning the Henderson account to Brandon. You'll be working on smaller local clients from now on." My blood ran cold. Henderson was my account, my client relationship, my success story. "You can't do that," I whispered. But we both knew he could. He was doing it. I left that conference room in a daze, barely seeing the concerned faces of my coworkers as I walked past. Amanda from accounting touched my arm. "Victoria? Are you okay? How did it go?" I couldn't answer. If I opened my mouth, I'd either scream or cry, and I refused to do either in that office. I made it to the bathroom just as the first tears fell. Locked in a stall, I let myself break down for exactly 5 minutes. Then I washed my face, reapplied my makeup, and stared at my reflection. The woman looking back at me had always played by the rules. I'd worked hard, stayed late, gone above and beyond. For what? To be punished for having boundaries? To watch less qualified men get promoted while I was demoted for refusing to be harassed? Something shifted in me then. A spark of anger that burned away the shame and fear. Marcus had made a critical mistake. He'd underestimated me. That evening, I sat in my tiny apartment with my laptop and began documenting everything. Every inappropriate comment, every late-night text message, every time Marcus had made me uncomfortable. I'd deleted nothing, thank goodness. Corporate training had taught us to keep records, and I had. Dates, times, witnesses. The dinner where his hand wandered. The hotel room incident that my colleague Priya had witnessed when she'd been walking past. The countless emails with subtle innuendos. I organized everything into a folder, my hands steady now with purpose. But I knew documentation alone wasn't enough. I needed a strategy. Marcus was powerful, well-connected. Human Resources reported directly to his golf buddy, the COO. A simple complaint would be buried and I'd be quietly pushed out. I needed leverage. I needed allies. And I needed to be smart about this. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend, Carmen. "Dinner? You sound stressed." I smiled grimly. Carmen was a lawyer. Over Thai food, I told Carmen everything. She listened without interruption, her expression growing darker with each detail. When I finished, she set down her chopsticks carefully. "Victoria, this is textbook quid pro quo harassment. You have a solid case." But I shook my head. A case means lawyers, depositions, months or years of legal battles. Marcus has the company's resources behind him. I'd be blackballed in the industry. Carmen considered this. "So what do you want to do?" I thought about it, really thought about it. I want justice. Not just for me, but for every woman he's done this to, and every woman he'll do it to if someone doesn't stop him. Carmen smiled slowly. "Then let's get creative." We spent the next 3 hours planning. Carmen knew employment law inside and out, and she had connections. More importantly, she believed me, believed in me. By the time we parted ways that night, I had a plan. It was risky, possibly career-ending if it backfired. But doing nothing was no longer an option. The next morning, I arrived at work early and went straight to Marcus's assistant, Diane. She was in her 50s, efficient and professional. We'd always been cordial. "Diane, can I ask you something in confidence?" I said quietly. She looked up from her computer, surprised. "Of course." I took a breath. "Has Marcus ever made you uncomfortable? Personally, I mean not professionally." Her fingers froze over the keyboard. For a long moment she didn't speak. Then quietly, "Why do you ask?" I told her about the promotion meeting, keeping my voice low. I watched her face carefully, and what I saw there confirmed my suspicions. "He did it to you too," I said softly. Diane's eyes filled with tears. She quickly blinked away. 20 years ago when I first started. I was young, needed the job. I thought if I just became his assistant, stayed professional, kept boundaries, it would stop. She paused. It did, eventually. But I've watched him do it to others. Young women, ambitious women. "Why didn't you report it?" I asked, though I knew the answer. Diane laughed bitterly. "And say what? Lose my pension 5 years before retirement? Victoria, men like Marcus don't face consequences. Women like us just survive." But that's where she was wrong, I thought. Times were changing. Slowly, too slowly, but they were changing. What if we didn't have to just survive? I suggested. What if we could actually do something? Diane studied me for a long moment. "What are you planning?" I couldn't tell her everything, not yet. But I needed her help. I need access to Marcus's calendar for the past year. Meeting schedules, travel records, expense reports. "Can you get that for me?" It was a huge ask. Diane could lose her job just for considering it. She turned back to her computer and I thought she was dismissing me. Then I heard the printer were to life. "The printer jammed," she said clearly. "I'll be in the supply room fixing it. My computer will be unlocked." Such a security risk. I had 15 minutes while Diane deliberately struggled with the printer. My hands flew over her keyboard, downloading files to a USB drive. Marcus's schedule revealed a pattern I'd suspected but hadn't confirmed. business trips where he'd taken different female employees, always booking adjoining hotel rooms. Expense reports for dinners that matched the nights he'd texted me and others inappropriately. A paper trail of predation. I also found something else. Emails between Marcus and Human Resources about previous complaints. 3 women in the past 7 years had reported him. All 3 had been quietly let go within 6 months, with generous severance packages and non-disclosure agreements. The company knew. They'd always known. They'd chosen to protect Marcus and silence his victims. My anger crystallized into cold determination. This wasn't just about me anymore. I finished downloading just as Diane returned. She didn't ask what I'd found. She simply sat down and resumed her work as if nothing had happened. That weekend, Carmen came over with another friend, Nicole, who worked in journalism. "I can't promise anything," Nicole said, reviewing my documentation. "But if what you're saying is true, if you have proof of a pattern, this is a story. Companies protecting serial harassers, paying off victims." She looked up at me seriously. "But you need to understand, Victoria. Going public is nuclear. Your name will be everywhere. Some people will support you, but others will tear you apart. They'll question your motives, your character, everything. I'd already considered this. I know. But if I stay silent, he wins. He keeps doing this and the company keeps covering for him." Nicole nodded slowly. "Hey. But we need more than documents. We need other women willing to go on record." That was the hardest part. The 3 women who'd been paid off couldn't speak due to NDAs. But Marcus had been at Silverstone for 15 years. There had to be others. Finding them was like excavating buried secrets. I started with LinkedIn, searching for women who'd worked in our department and left. I crafted careful messages, never mentioning Marcus by name at first, just asking about their experiences at Silverstone. Most didn't respond. A few sent polite but vague replies. But then I heard from Ashley. She'd worked under Marcus 4 years ago. "I'm not surprised," her email read. "He was inappropriate with me too. I left before it escalated, took a lower-paying job just to get away. I can't go on record. I'm married now and my husband doesn't know how bad it was. But there's a woman named Bethany who might talk. She was really hurt by what happened." Bethany agreed to meet me at a coffee shop across town. She was younger than me, maybe 26, with tired eyes that looked older. She'd left Silverstone 2 years ago after Marcus had destroyed her career prospects for refusing his advances. "He told everyone I was incompetent," she said, her voice shaking with old anger. "I went from being a rising star to a joke in 6 months. Nobody would work with me. Projects I led were reassigned. I was excluded from meetings." Bethany wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "I complained to HR. They did an investigation that consisted of asking Marcus if it was true. Of course he denied it. Then suddenly I was written up for every tiny mistake. I left before they could fire me. I saw my future in her story. If I'd complained through official channels, this would have been my fate too. I'm gathering evidence," I told her. "I'm going to expose him and the company's complicity. But I need people willing to speak publicly." Bethany hesitated. "I signed an NDA when I left." Carmen, who'd accompanied me, leaned forward. "NDAs related to harassment and discrimination are increasingly unenforceable, especially if there's a pattern of abuse. We can work around it." Slowly, Bethany nodded. "If it means he can't do this to anyone else, I'll do it." Over the next 3 weeks, I lived a double life. At work, I kept my head down, processed Marcus's unreasonable demands, and smiled blandly while he gloated about my demotion. After hours, I built my case. With Carmen's legal expertise, Nicole's journalistic contacts, and a growing network of Marcus's former victims, we assembled an airtight documentation of 15 years of harassment, company cover-ups, and systematic silencing of women. We had 8 women willing to go on record, including Diane, who'd finally decided her pension wasn't worth her conscience. We had emails, text messages, expense reports, and HR documents proving the company had paid out over $500,000 in settlements to keep Marcus's behavior quiet. Nicole's editor at a major news outlet had agreed to run the story. We just needed one more thing: Marcus to incriminate himself on record. That's where my acting skills came in. I requested a meeting with Marcus to discuss my future at the company. Marcus seemed pleased when I walked into his office on a Thursday afternoon. He probably thought I'd finally broken, that I was ready to negotiate on his terms. I'd worn a wire, a tiny recording device Carmen had obtained legally. In our state, only one party needed to consent to recording a conversation. Victoria, Marcus said warmly, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. I'm glad you reached out. I was hoping you'd see reason. I sat down, keeping my expression neutral. I've been thinking about what you said. About relationships and loyalty. His smile widened. I knew you were smart. You understand how the corporate world works. I let him talk, drawing him out with carefully phrased questions. So if I wanted to discuss my career advancement, what would that look like? Marcus leaned forward. Well, we'd need to build a more personal rapport. Trust. Maybe dinner this weekend? I know a discreet hotel with an excellent restaurant. He was so confident, so assured. And this would lead to my promotion? Absolutely, Marcus said smoothly. I take care of people who take care of me, Victoria. You'd be back on major accounts within a month. By next year you could be director of marketing. He outlined his terms explicitly, leaving no room for misinterpretation. He detailed how other women had advanced their careers through similar arrangements. He even named names, confirming information we'd gathered. He confessed to derailing Bethany's career. She was ungrateful, he said dismissively. After everything I offered her, she acted like I was some kind of predator. So I made sure she understood there are consequences for insulting me. The recording device captured every word. After 30 minutes I had everything we needed. I stood up and Marcus looked confused. Where are you going? I thought we were on the same page now. I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing but pity mixed with disgust. We'll never be on the same page, Marcus. Because you're a predator and I'm done being prey. His expression transformed from confusion to fury. What did you just say to me? I was already walking to the door. You'll find out soon enough. I left him sputtering threats about destroying my career, about how I'd never work in this industry again. Let him think he still had power. He'd realize the truth soon enough. That evening, Nicole's article went live online. Silverstone Corporation. How one company spent millions protecting a serial harasser, read the headline. The story was devastating, meticulously researched and legally vetted. 8 women shared their experiences. Documents proved the company's complicity. And Marcus's own words, recorded just hours earlier, provided damning confirmation of everything. My phone exploded with notifications. The article was being shared thousands of times. News outlets were picking it up. By morning it had gone viral. I sat in my apartment watching my life change in real time, feeling terrified and empowered in equal measure. There was no going back now. I didn't go to work the next day. Neither did Marcus, I later learned. The office was in chaos. Reporters had gathered outside Silverstone's headquarters. The board of directors called an emergency meeting. By noon, the CEO released a statement about taking the allegations seriously and launching an independent investigation. By evening, Marcus had been placed on administrative leave. The messages started coming. Former colleagues expressing support, some apologizing for not speaking up sooner. Strangers thanking me for my courage. But also the ugly messages, the ones questioning my motives, calling me an opportunist, accusing me of destroying a man's career for attention. Nicole had warned me about this. The backlash, the victim blaming, the inevitable counter-narrative that I was a scorned woman seeking revenge. It hurt, but it didn't break me. Because for every hateful message there were 10 more from women sharing their own stories. Women who'd experienced similar harassment, who'd stayed silent out of fear, who now felt less alone. 2 weeks later, I sat in a conference room at Carmen's law firm, across the table from Silverstone's legal team. They wanted to settle. We're prepared to offer you a generous compensation package, their lead attorney said. Plus a positive reference letter and agreement not to disparage the company. Carmen squeezed my hand under the table. This was my decision. The money they offered was life-changing. Enough to never worry about finances again, to start over somewhere new. But there was a catch, as there always was. In exchange, you'll sign an NDA about the settlement terms and agree to make no further public statements about your experiences at Silverstone. I looked at their expensive suits, their practiced expressions of regret. They didn't care about what had happened to me, to Bethany, to any of us. They cared about limiting liability and controlling the narrative. No, I said clearly. The lead attorney blinked. Ms. Victoria, I don't think you understand how generous this offer is. I understand perfectly, I replied. You want to pay me to be quiet just like you paid the others. But I'm not interested in money if it means helping you bury this. Carmen spoke up. My client will consider a settlement under different terms. First, Marcus Bennett must be permanently terminated. Second, Silverstone must implement mandatory harassment training, establish an independent reporting system that doesn't go through HR, and commit to transparency in how such complaints are handled. Third, the company must make a public donation to organizations supporting workplace harassment survivors. And fourth, any settlement will not include an NDA. The attorneys exchanged glances. Those terms are highly unusual. Carmen smiled tightly. So is having 8 women come forward about the same predator with proof that your company knew and did nothing. I imagine a jury would find that very interesting. They took a recess to call their bosses. When they returned, they agreed to everything except the no NDA provision. We negotiated for 3 more hours. Finally, we reached a compromise. The settlement allowed me to speak publicly about my experiences and Marcus's behavior, but not about the specific financial terms or internal company communications. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than silence. Marcus was fired for cause, forfeiting his pension and severance. The company committed to policy changes and a $1 million donation to harassment prevention organizations. I received compensation not just for my suffering, but for the career opportunities I'd lost. 3 months later, I stood on a stage at a women's leadership conference, telling my story to an audience of 500 people. The viral article had been just the beginning. I'd become an unexpected advocate speaking about workplace harassment and the importance of corporate accountability. It wasn't the career I'd planned, but it was meaningful in ways I'd never imagined. The hardest part wasn't standing up to Marcus, I told the audience. It was overcoming the belief that keeping quiet was the safer option. That my career mattered more than my dignity. That exposing the truth would hurt me more than staying silent. After the conference, a young woman approached me nervously. Thank you, she said, tears in her eyes. I'm dealing with something similar at my job. I didn't know what to do, but hearing your story makes me feel less alone. We talked for an hour. I gave her Carmen's card, connected her with resources, and reminded her that whatever she decided, to fight or to walk away, was valid. Not everyone could wage the battle I'd chosen, and that was okay. The system shouldn't require heroism from victims. The story didn't have a perfect ending. My career in corporate marketing was effectively over. Few companies wanted to hire the woman who'd taken down her employer, regardless of the justice of it. But I'd started consulting independently, helping companies develop genuine anti-harassment policies. The work was sporadic but fulfilling. Marcus tried to sue me for defamation. The case was dismissed within 3 months. Truth is an absolute defense, and everything I'd said was provably true. He disappeared from the industry after that. Bethany reached out 6 months after the article published. She'd found a new job at a company with strong ethical practices and she was thriving. I can't thank you enough, she said over video chat. I'd convinced myself that what happened was somehow my fault, that I should have handled it differently. Seeing you fight back, seeing him face consequences, it helped me heal. That meant more than any settlement check. Diane retired early with her full pension and sent me a card that read, "For 20 years I told myself there was nothing I could do. Thank you for proving me wrong." Ashley, the woman who'd connected me with Bethany, eventually left her marriage. Not because of Marcus, but because she'd realized she'd been compromising herself in multiple areas of her life. "Your story reminded me that I deserve better," she explained. The ripples kept spreading. Other women at other companies came forward with their own stories. Not all of them won their battles, but they fought. And that mattered. A year after that terrible promotion meeting, I sat in my home office reviewing a consulting contract with a tech startup. They wanted help establishing workplace culture from the ground up. My phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from the conference organizers, asking if I'd keynote their next event. I thought about Marcus, about that smirking question, "What raise?" He'd meant to break me that day to put me in my place. Instead, he'd unleashed something he couldn't control. The truth. I'd lost the promotion I'd worked for, lost the career I'd built, lost the naive belief that hard work alone would be enough. But I'd gained something too. My voice. My integrity. A purpose that went beyond climbing a corporate ladder. Not everyone understood my choices. Some thought I should have taken the money and moved on. Others believed I'd martyred myself unnecessarily. But I knew the truth. That conference room confrontation had been a crossroads. One path led to compromise, to survival, to quiet desperation. The other led here to a harder but more honest life. I chose right. And I'd choose it again.